I still remember the lump in my throat when my mom smiled at my younger sister playing a Chopin piece in the living room, then turned to me and said in a weightless tone like she was talking about some outdated decoration, "Scarlett, can't you try to be as graceful as your sister?" I was 12. Still holding the sketchbook that won me third place, statewide the certificate, still carried the scent of fresh ink. But my mom didn't ask a single question, didn't look once. Her eyes were fixed on Sophia, my sister 2 years younger, trained to become the perfect replica of our mother, polished, delicate, robotically polite. My name is Scarlett Adams, born and raised in the northern suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. We lived in a cream-colored 2-story house with hydrangeas in the backyard and a living room that always smelled like expensive scented candles. But beneath that polished surface was an unspoken truth. I was never the chosen child. My mother, Evelyn, was a former part-time model who became a housewife but still kept herself in shape, as if there were always cameras pointed her way. She treated life like a competition, and every child in the household was a contestant. Praise was a prize, and disappointment was a sentence. My dad, Frank, was an accountant for a major insurance company. A quiet man, patient, always trying to mediate. When my mom lashed out because I didn't get a perfect math score, all he could do was pat my shoulder and say with a weary voice, "Your mom just wants what's best for you, Scarlett." Don't blame her. But I knew that wasn't true. Because what's best in her eyes only existed when Sophia did it. My sister started piano lessons at 4. I loved to draw. But in our home, art didn't belong on the walls. It belonged in a music book. Every time she performed a new sonata, Mom would sit beside her, clapping, eyes sparkling like Sophia was the center of the universe. She's naturally talented, unlike someone else who has to work so hard just to get a B. I spoke up once. Just once. At 13, I entered a national drawing contest and won second place. I brought the certificate home, hoping for at least a smile. But Mom glanced at it and shook her head. "What good is drawing? You should focus on advanced geometry like Sophia. Art won't feed anyone." I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. Our family dinners looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Elegant table settings, warm lighting, grilled meat, or pan-seared salmon as the main course. But the air was colder than our central air conditioning. Mom would ask Sophia about her lessons, practice sessions, youth group picnics. As for me, I was asked the same question over and over. What did you do today to improve your grades? Not, how are you, or did you have fun? Just, have you caught up to your sister yet? Being weighed by every action, every breath, every grade turned me into a kid who hid her emotions. I learned not to talk about what I liked. I didn't mention my friends. I never showed I was hurt. Every feeling was measured, compared, and dismissed. When Sophia was selected to give a speech at school, Mom called the entire family to brag. When I was invited to join the town mural project, she only said, "A mural, don't ruin your new clothes." I didn't hate my sister. I used to adore her. But being cast as the not good enough daughter year after year wore down every bit of natural affection. Sophia never acted smug. In fact, she often looked at me with pity. But even that gaze made me feel smaller. At 15, my dad brought home an old camera he found at a garage sale. I photographed everything: sunlight through the window, the neighbor's dog, my grandma's hands as she knitted. For the first time, I created something that wasn't judged. I hid those pictures in a box under my bed where Mom would never look. Because in our home, only one type of success was allowed to shine. And Scarlett Adams, the older daughter with dreams of being an artist, wasn't part of that plan. I don't know when I stopped trying to make Mom proud. Maybe it was the day I waited an hour outside my art class for her only to get a blunt text, "Busy. Get yourself home." From that day forward, I stopped waiting. For attention. For praise. For validation. I just tried to survive my own family. Like each day was a song I had to play in perfect rhythm, even if my heart beat to an entirely different melody. I had no idea that this very difference would be what saved me later on. At 17, I applied to be a part-time assistant at an animal rescue center outside Raleigh. Not to impress anyone, but because they're among barking dogs and sleepy cats stretched out on worn blankets I felt needed. I took portraits of every abandoned animal. Not staged photos, but real moments. A dog peeking through a cage, the closed eyes of a gray cat resting on a frayed wool rug. The pictures began to circulate. Some local shelters reached out and asked me to take adoption photos. I didn't take money. I just wanted those animals to be seen, to be chosen. Of course, Mom saw it as a waste of time. Scarlett, you need to focus on school. No good college will accept a pet photographer. I nodded as always, then quietly packed my camera. What was the point of arguing when every conversation ended like a verdict? I got accepted to North Carolina State University, majoring in visual communications. Moving into my freshman dorm felt like I could finally breathe. No more fake dinners. No more piano solos that sounded like victory marches. That September I met him. Chase Wilson Jr. in aerospace engineering, on an ROTC scholarship, tall son, kissed, always wearing a black watch, with a frayed strap like it meant something. We were in the same group for a veteran student outreach project. He spoke gently, looked you straight in the eye, no judgment, no deflection. When I told him my mom once cut down one of my paintings because it didn't fit the family aesthetic, Chase just chuckled. Maybe it was too good. It cracked the perfection she worked so hard to keep. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because someone actually saw me. Not through Sophia. We weren't dramatic. Sunday morning coffees. Photos I took of him reading in the library, sunlight in his hair. Sometimes he came to the shelter, crouched to play with the puppies, with a tenderness rare in guys our age. Almost 2 years later, when he got into the Air Force training program, he proposed. I agreed, without hesitation. I called home to share the news. My dad sounded hesitant, but he still congratulated me. As for my mom, there was a long pause on the phone before she finally said, "So you're going to throw your future away just to marry someone who lives on base?" All the time I heard the sound of a wine glass hitting the table on the other end, cold and sharp. You marry a soldier, and you'll end up in a rental house raising a child alone every time he gets deployed. That's the happiness you're so proud of. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because if I had to choose between the man who let me be myself and the mother who never accepted me for who I was, I already had my answer. Chase's family was different. His dad, a retired pilot, invited me to dinner, asked about my hobbies, showed me childhood pictures of his son. His mom, Valerie, hugged me the first time we met. "You look a little too skinny. Let me pack up some of Chase's favorite walnut cake for you to take home." I turned my face away. Something warm stung my eyes. We had a small wedding at a wooden chapel in Asheville, just close friends and Chase's family. My mom didn't come. Sophia sent a message, "I hope you'll be happy your way." Honestly, that was the kindest thing she ever said to me. I wore a simple white dress, no silk, no lace, no sweeping train. Chase wore his ceremonial uniform. He looked dignified yet gentle. When we exchanged rings, I caught my dad, Mr. Frank, standing quietly at the back of the aisle. His eyes carried a weight he hadn't put into words. 9 months later, on a misty morning outside the window of our small apartment in Fayetteville, I gave birth to our first son, Evan. Evan had my brown eyes and his father's soft curls. From the moment I held him in my arms, I knew no matter what happened, I would never let him grow up the way I did in the gray shadow of comparison, disappointment, and unreachable expectations. My mother came to the hospital 3 days later. She brought a fancy gift basket, a designer newborn outfit from a boutique, and a look of disapproval that swept from one end of my modest hospital room to the other. "You named him Evan. I thought you'd at least keep part of the traditional names." I didn't answer. Evan was sleeping on my chest, his tiny hand curled around my index finger, like he was afraid I'd disappear. She stepped closer to look at him. "He's cute, but looks kind of small. Are you sure he's being properly cared for?" I turned my face away. That familiar feeling started building in my throat, the one that had kept me silent through so many teenage years. But this time, I didn't let it win. "You didn't need to come if all you brought were comments like that." The room fell heavy and quiet. My dad spoke up. Evelyn, she just had a baby. Could you be a little kinder? My mom didn't respond. She simply stood tall, smoothed her sleeve, and walked out. My dad stayed behind, gently holding my hand. You did great, Scarlett. I looked at Evan, then at him. Better than I ever thought I could. I didn't know what the future would look like. Chase still had deployments ahead. Evan would grow up with questions. But I promised myself this: my child would never have to wonder if he was loved unconditionally. Because if there's one thing I learned from the past, it's that real love doesn't begin with you, should be, it only takes one thing that you are. I was sorting clothes in the closet when the knock came. Evan had just turned 4 and was playing with his old train set in the living room when 2 men in uniform walked down the hallway of our small apartment complex in Wilmington. I froze when I saw their coats through the frosted glass. A paper. A nod. A carefully practiced expression of condolences. They call those moments loss. But to me, it was gravity breaking apart. I didn't scream. I just sank to the floor like a puppet with snapped strings, while Evan stared at me with wide eyes, not understanding why Mommy wasn't answering. Chase had died while helping evacuate a school in northern Nangarhar province, Afghanistan. An ambush. No time to call home. That night, I lay on my side next to Evan, my arm under his head. He whispered, "Is Daddy on a work trip?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, baby. Daddy's not coming back. But you always have, Mommy. Always." Just 3 days later, my mother showed up. She didn't cry. She wore oversized sunglasses, carried a Louis Vuitton purse, and walked in like she was inspecting something she ordered online. She looked around our modest 2-bedroom rental where Evan and I lived on military survivor benefits and spoke in a flat tone. "You can't raise Evan alone. You two should move back home." I looked up from the unfinished stack of insurance paperwork. "Thank you, but we're doing fine." She didn't react. She just walked over to where Evan was coloring with his crayons and crouched down. "Grandma has a big room with a bubble tub. I'll buy you an electric toy car, the kind with remote control." Evan beamed. I bit my lip. A few weeks later, she came again, this time with a shoebox from a high-end brand. Inside were bright blue toddler sneakers. The price tag still on $190. I placed the box back on the table. "You don't need to buy these things, Mom. I'm not doing this for you, Scarlett. I'm doing it for Evan. He needs what's best." I didn't argue, because I understood she was replaying the same game she'd always mastered, using love as leverage, then forcing people to bow with conditional generosity. From that point on, she started showing up more often, always bringing something new: toys, clothes, expensive takeout from an Italian restaurant. Things I couldn't afford on a school administrative assistant's salary. Then slowly she began interfering with my son's schedule, signing Evan up for French lessons on Tuesdays without asking me, even though I had planned to take him on a school field trip. Inviting him to her best friend's grandchild's birthday party on the same day I intended to visit Chase's parents in Chapel Hill. When I objected, she just shrugged. "You always make everything complicated. Kids need exposure to broaden their world. Clinging to Mommy all the time isn't healthy." My dad would quietly call me afterward, after one of those tense dinners, "Just try to be gentle with your mother. She doesn't know how to express concern in the normal way." I hung up without saying anything. How could I explain that what she called concern always carried the stench of control? Sophia, the eternal shining light in my mother's eyes, now had twin daughters and lived in a fancy neighborhood near Charlotte. Every time Mom called on FaceTime, she would tilt the screen toward the girls in ballet outfits, her voice gleaming with pride. "Sophia's daughter just skipped a grade. Only 5 and already reading in 2 languages. Evan's still not reading fluently, is he?" I put the phone down without answering. Evan overheard, turned to me. "Mom, am I bad at school?" I pulled him into a tight hug. One Friday afternoon, I picked Evan up from school and found my mother standing at the door holding a brand new LAGO Technic set. The one Evan had mentioned wanting but I couldn't afford. He squealed with joy, ran to hug her, his eyes glowing. She looked at me calmly. "He needs joy. but something inside me solidified. I might be poorer than Sophia. I might live in an old apartment cook every night, wear clearance rack clothes. But Evan, my son, would grow up knowing love isn't conditional, isn't transactional, and certainly isn't measured by the price tag on a toy. For that, I would do anything. Even if it meant standing up to the woman who gave me life, but never once let me be myself. That evening, heavy clouds rolled over Wilmington, thick and dark, despite it only being mid-March. Evan, 8 years old, messy hair clutching his Star Wars helmet, begged to ride his bike with friends. I hesitated. But he had just finished his first school science presentation, face beaming, eyes lit up. I nodded. But don't go outside the neighborhood, okay? I won't, Mom. Just one loop, just one loop. 35 minutes later, my phone rang. An unknown number. A rushed woman's voice. Are you Evan Adams's mother? Your son's been in a bike accident. We called an ambulance. He's being taken to Cape Fear Medical Center. The mug slipped from my hand. I heard it shatter on the floor, but felt nothing except a hollow emptiness. Next came the sirens. The blinding white hospital hallways. The doctor talking about brain bleeding, a fractured femur, blunt chest trauma, suspected brain injury. I couldn't follow each sentence. It all slid into a deep pit where light couldn't reach. Is my son, is he alive? He still has a pulse. We'll do everything we can. 7 hours passed. Evan was moved to the ICU, unresponsive tubes everywhere, the ventilator rising and falling. His face swollen and bruised forehead, bandaged left leg in a steel brace. The machines were the only sign he hadn't left this world. I sat there frozen, holding his small, cold hand. I didn't sleep that night. No one asked me to leave. No one reminded me to eat. The nurses rotated shifts, offering lukewarm coffee and gentle words. I didn't care. By the second morning, Roger Chase's father drove down from Chapel Hill with his wife. Valerie brought personal items, towels, snacks, a soft navy travel pillow. She sat beside me, arms around my shoulders. You don't have to be made of stone, Scarlet. If you need to cry, cry. And I did. Silent. No tears. But my throat burned. That evening, co-workers from the elementary school sent messages. A friend dropped off a meal container in the waiting area. I didn't touch it. My phone rang. My mother's name lit up on the screen. I stared at it for a long time before answering. Have you heard anything? Evan's grandmother hasn't gotten any updates? You could have at least sent one message, Scarlet. I'm at the ICU, Mom. Evan is in a coma. There was a pause. Then her voice, well, I have a hair appointment this afternoon, and Sophia's throwing her 35th birthday party. What's done is done. Just let me know when there's real news. I hung up. That was when something cracked inside me, not loud, but slow and deep. My dad called later and spoke softly. I'll try to come by on Wednesday. Your mother, she's not the best with these things. But I'll be there. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. On the third morning, the doctor said Evan hadn't shown natural reflexes yet, but his intracranial pressure levels were stabilizing. It might be a good sign. Or not. They would begin reducing the sedative dosage to observe his response. I sat close to my son, telling stories about the rescue center cats, last summer's camping trip, and the rocket-shaped cake Evan once wanted, but never got to have. The head nurse, Laura, whispered, just keep talking to him. Kids sometimes hear more than we think. My voice trembled as I spoke of how his father used to fold paper airplanes and hand them to Evan, saying, one day you'll fly farther than your mom ever dreamed. By late afternoon, I stepped out to wash my face. When I returned, Valerie was adjusting the faux flower arrangement by the bedside. She smiled gently. Even fake flowers need a little freshening up. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. Being there was enough. By the third night, time lost meaning. My world revolved around the hiss of the ventilator, the beeping heart monitor, and the ICU doors swinging open and closed. I dozed off briefly, only to wake the moment a nurse adjusted an IV line. At dawn, while holding Evan's hand, I felt his pinky twitch. It wasn't a full squeeze, just the faintest flicker. I immediately looked at the monitor. Slight uptick in heart rate. Blood pressure steady. The ventilator still pumping rhythmically. I leaned closer and whispered, "Mommy's here, Evan. Take your time. No rush." That little hand moved again. Softer than a breeze, but it moved. Laura entered, checked the machines, and called the doctor. I wasn't ready to hope, but I held his hand tighter. People say the space between life and death is as thin as a final breath. But I didn't believe Evan would leave. Because one thing I refused to let my mother teach me, through her critiques, was this: when a mother sits beside her child's bed, praying with every breath, nothing is impossible. No birthday party is worth leaving a child to fight alone. No version of concern should be used to control a woman who's pouring everything she has into keeping her child tethered to this world. Evan lay there in silence. But from now on, I wouldn't be silent. The phone rang just as I finished washing my face in the ICU bathroom. The screen lit up Mom. 3 days. No texts. No calls. Not a single question about whether her 8-year-old grandson fighting for his life on a ventilator was still breathing. I took a deep breath and answered, "Scarlett, I'm overwhelmed. No one has prepped the decorations for Sophia's party yet. Can you swing by around noon tomorrow? I think 2 hours should do." I thought I misheard. My throat dried up. I leaned against the cold tile wall and closed my eyes. Evan still hasn't woken up, Mom. I'm not leaving here. A pause. Then her voice sharpened, firm and clear. This party has been scheduled for 3 months. Sophia's in-laws are flying in from Texas. I've booked a photo studio. If you're not there, people will ask questions. You should think carefully before embarrassing me. I opened my eyes and looked in the mirror. Gaunt face. Messy bun. Eyes dark from lack of sleep. A dry, bitter laugh escaped. "My son is in a coma, in the ICU. I'm not coming. I'm not going anywhere." She inhaled sharply, clearly trying to restrain herself. "If you insist on defying the family like this, I'll have to reconsider Evan's scholarship fund and the reserve account your father and I set up. Don't push me to do something we'll all regret." My hands trembled as I gripped the phone, voice steady. "You're threatening to pull his funding because I won't decorate for Sophia's party. I'm reminding you that loyalty goes both ways. If someone refuses to uphold family values, the privileges attached can't continue." I didn't reply right away, not because I hesitated, but because the rage rising in me burned like fire in every cell. I slowly pulled the phone from my earhead and deleted her number. Not blocked, deleted. For good. When I returned to the ICU, the night nurse Kelly looked at me with concern. "You okay?" I sat beside Evan, wrapped his small hand, cold from the meds, in mine. "No, but I will be." I didn't tell anyone about the call. Valerie, my former mother-in-law, handed me a mug of hot ginger tea. Her eyes were warmer than the bedside lamp. "Did they call?" I shook my head. She understood. No further words needed. The next morning, my dad arrived at the hospital. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, suit wrinkled. He held a brown paper bag with sandwiches and orange juice. When I told him about Mom's threat to pull Evan's college fund, he stayed quiet for a long time. Then he exhaled. "You don't owe your mother anything, Scarlett. She lives in her own world, but you don't have to enter it anymore." Later that day, I checked my phone, no new messages. Yet her words echoed in my bones. Withdraw the scholarship. Pull the reserve funds. Prioritize her pride over a child's survival. I sat in a hospital hallway and opened my laptop. Pulled up the power of attorney. Mom had pressured me into signing the year before, tying Evan's scholarship fund to her control. Every line now glared like a blade. I drafted an email to Chase's attorney. Subject: urgent review of legal bindings with Evelyn Sanders priority status. That night, as Kelly replaced Evan's IV bag, she said, intracranial pressures starting to drop. That's a good sign. I couldn't feel relieved. Not yet. Not while my soul felt like it had been drained dry. I turned to Evan and whispered, If you wake up, I promise you won't grow up with the kind of conditional love I once did. I'll protect you even if no one stands with me." His hand twitched slightly. I thought I imagined it. But when Kelly came over, she confirmed there's minor motor response. He's starting to process signals. Not much, but it's real. I leaned down, wrapping my arms around his little hand. Out there, Sophia's birthday party was probably in full swing, glittering chandeliers, classical music, a 3-tier cake, and rehearsed blessings, sparkling like the table decor. But I was sitting within 4 hospital walls, in an old sweater, messy hair, holding the only life I'd never trade away. The ventilator hissed steadily in the cold white room. I had grown so used to it that a single pause made my heart clench. Evan blinked. Not a reflex, not a spasm, but a conscious movement. I leaned closer, close enough to feel his breath light as morning mist. "Can you hear me, baby?" His eyelids fluttered. His finger gently squeezed mine, so fragile, yet it hit me with overwhelming force. "I'm here, Evan. I'm not leaving. Ever." His eyes fully opened. At first unfocused, but slowly sharpening. He looked straight at me. "Mom," his voice was faint, barely a sound. I gripped his hand, trembling. "It's okay. You don't have to speak. I'm here." Nurse Marcus stepped in, eyes wide. "Oh my God, he's actually awake. I'll get the doctor within minutes." Dr. Lin, our lead neurologist, arrived with 3 nurses. He performed reflex checks, light flashes, gentle taps, calling Evan's name. Evan responded slowly, but he responded. This is a promising start. His brain may still recover well if progress continues. We'll attempt to remove the ventilator tomorrow morning if things stay stable. I nodded, afraid if I spoke, I'd burst into tears. That night, as Evan was moved to lighter assisted breathing, I sat by his bed whispering little stories about a dog named Rocket at the rescue center, about the summer we planned to visit the aviation museum in Georgia, about the chocolate chip cookies Evan once baked burnt edges, and all but he'd laugh, because I always ate them anyway. Sometimes he drifted off from exhaustion. But when he woke, he looked for me, as if making sure I hadn't disappeared. Near midnight, Evan whispered, "Mom didn't leave me." I leaned closer. "That's right." I promised. He took a weak breath. "You did the right thing." Those 3 words hit like a tidal wave. Words that proved all my so-called selfish choices had been worth it. The next morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, the sharp click of heels echoed down the ICU hallway. I looked up. My mother appeared, followed by Sophia, in a neat cream-colored dress. They looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion spread into a place where pain was real and hovering over a hospital bed. "So you finally turned your phone back on my mother," said I, scanning the room. "Sophia had to call Marcus to find out Evan was awake." "How disrespectful." I stood blocking her path to the bed. "I don't want Evan disturbed by people who weren't here when we needed them most." My mother lifted her chin. Posture. Theatrical family shows up in different ways. I had to handle Sophia's party, no one else could. But I've been monitoring Evan's condition by the hour. I stayed silent. Evan's eyes fluttered open, unsure, looking toward them. Sophia stepped forward. "Hi, Evan. I heard you've been very brave." He didn't respond. His eyes searched for me. I held his hand. "I'm right here. No one can touch you if you're not comfortable." My mother's voice stiffened. "You're being dramatic, Scarlett. No one's taking anything. We're here for the child." I turned, voice low but firm. "Each visitor gets no more than 5 minutes. No talk of finances. No mentions of family duty. No emotional manipulation. Violate any of these, and you're out." Sophia stepped back, startled. My mother's eyes widened. "You don't have the right. I am Evan's legal guardian. If you want to play games, go back to Sophia's next celebration." 5 minutes. I timed every second. After a few empty words from my mother and Sophia's photo brag of the twins, I pointed to the door. "Evan needs rest." My mother leaned in to kiss his forehead, but Evan turned his face away. I didn't react. Sophia slowly tucked her phone away, eyes uneasy. After they left, Evan squeezed my hand. Mom, are you mad at Grandma? I looked at him, thought carefully, then said, I'm not mad. I'm protecting you from what's unnecessary. He whispered, Grandma said you were selfish. Is that true? I stroked his hair. I'm not going anywhere, Evan. No matter what anyone says. If protecting you makes me selfish, then I'll proudly carry that label for the rest of my life. He didn't reply, but this time his hand squeezed mine back, clearly purposefully, not by reflex. In that moment, I understood some battles aren't won through arguments. They're won by showing up, by never walking away, by not letting others define the value of your love with empty words or dangling money. I once spent my entire youth chasing my mother's approval. And now all I need is for my son to know I never left. Not for a single moment. 3 weeks after Evan opened his eyes, the ICU room no longer felt like a cold prison. It became a place where my son was learning how to touch the world again. He wasn't lying still among feeding tubes anymore. He was mumbling unclear sounds, trying to move his legs still braced in metal supports. Dr. Lyme called it neurological reconnection. To me, it was a miracle. Each morning, Evan practiced hand movements with a small rubber ball. In the afternoon, a nurse helped him flex each toe on his left foot, even just a few millimeters. These quiet efforts drained all his energy, but after every session he'd hold my hand and say, I'll keep trying so we can go home. Each night, I sat beside his bed, notebook open, listing post-hospital treatment costs, neurosupport meds, speech therapy, a temporary wheelchair, a special diet. The scholarship fund Mrs. Evelyn had set up for Evan was officially frozen. The lawyer confirmed she had amended her will, cutting out both me and her grandson. I didn't feel hurt, just relieved, like a rusted door finally closed behind me for good. I posted online launching a photo service family portraits, pets candid outdoor sessions. I worked at the school by evening and spent weekends with my camera wandering parks and neighborhoods across Wilmington. I advertised clearly real photography. No props. No posing. Just honest moments. Bookings started filling up. Some weeks I had 8 sessions. Valerie, my former mother-in-law, sometimes took Evan to therapy for me or delivered pre-cooked meals to our door. No fuss. No demands. Sophia, my sister, mailed a new LEGO Star Wars, set along with a short card hope Evan enjoys. Wishing things are better. No apology. No mention of what Mom had said in the hospital room that day. I set the toy box on a shelf, not giving it to Evan. Not as punishment, but because Evan deserved the truth, not cold compromises. My dad called on a Sunday afternoon. He didn't mention my mother. Just asked how many steps did Evan take today 6. His left hand still weak, but he gripped the bed rail. Was he steady, shaky? But he smiled so brightly. He went quiet, then said, almost confessing, I've never been able to intervene before. But if you ever need anything, call me. Don't carry it all alone anymore. I leaned my forehead against the window, watching the sunlight fall across the backyard, where Valerie was helping Evan into his wheelchair. She adjusted his cloth cap and soothed him in a voice sweet as baked sugar. You have people who care for real. That's enough. By month 3, Evan began walking with small crutches. Every step hurt, but he still smiled. He tracked his milestones, dressing himself, making it down the hall, using his right hand to pick up pancakes. I printed photos of him and hung them all over the room, sweaty-faced as he breathed, without a machine, his hand flexing him, standing under hospital courtyard sunlight, bright crutch at his side. Those images didn't need my mother's judgment, or Sophia's praise. They were proof real love doesn't come with conditions. One afternoon, a thin envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a copy of a legal document confirming I was no longer a beneficiary to any of Mrs. Evelyn Sanders's assets. At the bottom, her signature curved just like the ones I'd stared at through the glass cabinet as a child. There was also a handwritten note, just 2 lines: family is obligation, not a choice. You chose differently. I did what had to be done. I folded it up and tucked it in a drawer. No reply needed. The following week, when Evan was officially cleared to leave the hospital, I brought him home to our third-floor apartment. On that first day back after 4 months, he stood in the doorway for a few seconds, then smiled. "Mom, I missed the kitchen smell too." I turned on the lights. A soft glow spread through our modest but clean and cozy space. That night, after a simple dinner, we sat on the sofa flipping through pictures from the hospital. Evan held up one of him in the wheelchair, tilting his head. "I don't think Grandma would like this one." "Maybe not. But I do." Because I was really smiling. I pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "Then that's all that matters. My child, the one who almost left this world, was still here, growing up with simple things that had nothing to do with money control or empty celebrations." On a spring afternoon, when Evan turned 9, I was arranging lavender sprigs into a recycled glass jar when a knock came at the door. Jake, his best friend since 3rd grade, peeked in. "Cheerful Miss Scarlet Pizza's here." Evan said, "I should run up and tell you." I smiled, wiped my hands on my apron, and headed downstairs. Sunlight poured through the third-floor apartment. Kids' laughter echoed from the balcony where Evan had strung handmade lights. 6 children gathered around a table of cupcakes and puzzle games. No helium balloons. No giant cake or smoke machine. Just real voices, real joy, and handwritten birthday wishes clipped to twine with wooden pins. On the corner of the table sat the card I had kept for a whole year. "Happy birthday, Evan. Love you, Mom." There was no card from Grandma or Aunt Sophia. No one expected one. Not even Evan mentioned it. That evening, after the small party ended and Jake was picked up by his parents, the two of us sat on the living room floor, picking up wrapping paper, gathering empty boxes, and stacking the leftover cake. Evan looked up while I was tying the trash bag. "Mom, can I ask you something?" I dropped my hands and tilted my head toward him. "Yeah, if I don't get a scholarship, will we still have money for college?" I paused for a few beats. The question didn't come from fear, it came from preparation. Like when Evan would ask, "If it rains tomorrow, do we have a jacket?" I pulled him close. "We'll figure it out: scholarships, part-time jobs, loans if needed." "But I believe you're smart enough to get one." He nodded softly, eyes fixed on the desk lamp. "So we don't need Grandma's money." I wasn't surprised by the question. Evan always noticed more than I gave him credit for. The boy who once lay in the ICU, unable to speak, was now asking what I should have asked a long time ago. I smiled. "No. We don't need anyone's money if the price is silence and endless gratitude." Evan nodded, lips pressing together. "I didn't like how Grandma talked about you, like it was your fault I got hurt. I remember she said, if your mom hadn't insisted on being a single parent, things would have been different." I gently squeezed his hand, feeling a dull ache tighten in my chest, then slowly past, "Some people will never understand. What matters is that you do. That's enough." He leaned his head on my shoulder, exhaling a breeze like sigh. "I want to be a robotics engineer someday, so I can help people walk again like I was helped." I didn't answer, just nodded. Everything that needed saying had already been said. A few weeks later, I received a call from my personal attorney. The house in Greensboro, the last family asset with real value, had been transferred to Sophia. No warning, no message sent to me. My dad called that late afternoon. His voice was hoarse, "No longer trying to smooth things over. Your mom wants everything in its rightful place. She says you don't need anything from her now." I leaned against the window, still holding a mug of cold tea. "She's right." Silence. "I don't need anything from someone who puts conditions on love. And I won't take anything from a past that makes my son ask, 'Is family something you have to trade for?'" Across the street, the sound of kids playing soccer echoed. "I'm sorry, Scarlett. You stood in the middle for too long. If you still want to see your grandson, you'll need to stand on the right side now." Life moved on. I kept taking photos on weekends, teaching part-time at the elementary school, and spending evenings writing bits of memories. Not to post online. Not to tell anyone. But to remember. To remember that some wounds don't need to be forgotten. They just don't get to decide for us anymore. Evan could now run for 3 full minutes without stopping. He beamed after each physical therapy session, sweating like he'd played a championship match, and hugged me like he'd just won a trophy. He didn't need Grandma to teach him how to succeed. Didn't need extended family to call him worthy. What he needed was someone who believed in him even when the machines went silent. And I was there. On Evan's birthday night, after he fell asleep from a full day of laughter and games, I stepped out onto the balcony, poured a glass of wine, and looked into the misty sky, slowly raising the glass. Not to celebrate his birthday, but to say goodbye to all the years I believed I had to stay quiet to be loved. Evan is growing up with kindness, the kind that can't be bought, can't be controlled through a will. And the most beautiful part, he understood that long before I ever had to teach it. Scarlett's story is a testament to the fact that not everyone born into a family truly understands what real love means. She couldn't choose where her story began, but she chose how to end the cycle of damage and manipulation. By standing up for her son and setting firm boundaries with her own mother, Scarlett reclaimed the freedom, dignity, and peace she deserved. In real life, sometimes walking away from a toxic relationship is the most powerful act of love we can give ourselves and those who come after us. What do you think about Scarlett's choice? Would you have the courage to walk away from toxic family ties like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and resilience.